What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the workshop. Now it's time for the next part of this resin table build. Now if you're new here, and what I'm trying to achieve here is do a complete series on a resin table build, start to finish, go into it in detail and show you everything you need to do to create this. I have the top finished now and it looks absolutely stunning. I'm really happy with how this came out. So in the first video, we took a live edge slab, we built a router sled and we flattened our live edge slab. In the last video, we built a mold and we did the resin pour. It was a 4-stage pour to achieve this effect. So that's all in another video. In this video, we pull the slab from the mold, put it back in the router sled, flatten it, sand it, polish it and get an oil finish on it to get it to this stage. And I have to say, I'm really happy with how this turned out and it looks absolutely stunning. Now this video was filmed over a course of a week or a few days, so there's some continuity errors in this. It's filmed over a few weeks, and if I look a bit disheveled and tired at times, it's because I'm burning the candle at both ends at the minute. I'm flat out with electrical work, and I'm also flat out trying to build this and get a YouTube video up. So yeah, it's a lot of late nights. So let's get on with the show. We're going to pull this slab or this tabletop from its mold, get it flattened, get it sanded, and get it nice and polished and finished. Let's do it. Okay guys, it's been almost 4 days now. This has cured and fully set up, so we can break it out of our mold now and have a look at it, and it should come out pretty easy. I can already feel it just by pushing on this polypropylene that it's breaking free of the mold. So yeah, it's going to come out pretty easy, I'd say. I'll give you a close-up of this coming out. So like I say, the good thing about the polypropylene is the resin doesn't stick to it, neither does the hot glue or the painter's caulk. You can just pull it all off, just like that, and we should be good to go. And we can reuse it for our next table, which is nice. Okay, we just have to break our table free now. That should be relatively straightforward. Just like that. How easy is that? Okay guys, so we have our table out now. I'll just give you a quick look at the underside of this now. It's pretty heavy because we have all that resin in it now, and we have obviously the piece of oak. Just try and get this up on its edge. So there's the underneath. So you can see against the shiny surface of the polypropylene, you get a lovely finish on the bottom. So I'm not going to do much of that. You can see there's a couple of little holes where the resin never made it in. That's okay, we can fill that with some resin, we can fill these with some resin. But again, it's the underside of the table, so it's not going to be really seen, but it still looks pretty good in my book as it is. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And again, this is the underside, so and it's perfectly flat, so we don't have to do anything with it. It's perfectly flat from being on top of the polypropylene sheet. We'll fill these all right with a bit of resin maybe. And yeah, should be good to go. There's not too much we need to do with that. Okay guys, it's on to the following day and I have it set up in the router sled. Now this video is going to take place over several days, so there might be some continuity issues, but I probably said this in the intro. I'm not even sure if I said it in the intro because I haven't filmed the intro yet. But the slab is inside in the router jig. Now, I've had a couple of issues. It came out of the mold perfectly flat and I left it and I got a slight twist in my top. I'm not sure why it happened or how it happened, but I've clamped it overnight. So I have a clamped here, clamped it here. I added a bit of heat to it and it took most of the twist out of it. So it's more or less back to flat again. So I'm wondering, is it a cooling issue? The last few days in Ireland, the weather has been really cool and it's got kind of really wet. Today it's a really warm day again and the slab seems to be holding its flatness a bit more. I'll give you a look at the edge and show you how much it moved now in a minute. But it's going to make flattening this a little bit interesting. If I was to flatten it and not clamp it now, I would be flattening it in its twisted state, which I can't do. So the option I'm left with is to clamp this so that it sits flat and then flatten this top. Now it's going to affect the base that I have to build. So we'll see at the end of the finishing process how twisted this top is or how flat we can get it back to. Because if I have to use the base to sit this on to pull this top slab flat again, it might have to be a steel frame we have to go with rather than a timber frame. So it's a little bit interesting. I'm not quite sure what it is. I have a few ideas what may have happened. The fact that I'm using separated oak edge pieces out here at the edge of my river, it may have lifted in this corner and this corner, which I think it did. Maybe the resin contracted slightly and just lifted those edges up because it's not held with long pieces of timber, if you know what I mean. So that may be the issue here. Again, this is all experimentation on my behalf. But yeah, I have it back to flat again. I'll give you a quick look. Okay guys, this is the corner of the slab that moves the most, and if I just pop the clamp, you can see it is lifted there. Now this was up a good bit. It was nearly a centimetre of a twist I had in it last night. Now it's down to, I don't know, maybe 5 mil, so I've reduced it by 5 mil and it seems to be pretty stable at that. But I can add some heat to it and I can get that out of it a bit more. It's a little bit concerning as to why it has twisted so much. I'm not quite sure what happened. So I'm going to have to use the router jig on it. I'm going to have to pull it flat. It doesn't actually take that much force to pull it flat. So there's a bit of flex in the resin, I would say. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to make a definitive claim on this, but I'm going to have to flatten it like this now, and maybe the base that I put on this will have to pull this slab flat as I put it on it. So that might be the plan. We'll see. But we're going to get it finished now anyway. We're going to start leveling this top with the router, and we'll take it from there. Let's do it. So there you go, there you can see the issue with this now. So it's not a straightforward flattening process. The clamps are actually going to get in the way when I get to the end of this, so I'm going to have to move my clamps to in here. I'm going to find another way of clamping it so that I can get the router jig all the way out to the edge. Same with these clamps, I've had to put a timber across it in order to clamp the back edge of the slab. So that's going to have to move as well when I get the router down there. So yeah, it's going to make flattening it just a little bit more awkward. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if we were starting from scratch again, this was a live edge slab, having a twist in it isn't a big deal. You just slowly remove the twist out of it from both sides and then you flatten your slab again. I'm not doing that now. I'm not going to do that process like I done in the first video because I don't want to remove a whole pile of resin material off this. Most of my pattern is in the top of my resin and I'm not digging down into the resin. So I now have to pull this thing flat. I think it's going to be the best option in order to get this right. Again, it's not a whole lot. It's about 5 mil in this corner and I have a couple of mil in this corner. So we should be able to pull it flat with a frame. Again, there's not a lot of tension and heat seems to help to flatten this thing out. So yeah, there we go. It's an interesting one. Like I say, I'm new to these resins tables. I'm not 100% sure why that occurred, but we're going to get on to flattening now anyway. But I have got a new router bit, so yeah, it's a nice wide one, so it's not going to take nearly as many passes as flattening the live edge slab took. So let's get on with this. This is going to be a lot of noise, a lot of dust, and yeah, take our time. Light passes over and back, a few passes I'd say it's going to take, but we're going to take light cuts and overlapping cuts as well to get the best surface we can get. So let's do it. Hey guys, we've taken a nice few passes there, about 20 passes or so. And you can see just how nicely this resin takes a router bit. So that's really nice and flat. It's really not going to take much now to bring this back up to a polished finish. Even the highly patterned section, like up to 320 grit, is sometimes enough on this resin. For the see-through stuff, you really want to get that up to the high grits and get a polish on it to get it shining again. But that's really nice and flat. I'm really happy with how this is taking a router bit. So I'm going to get on now and do this entire slab just like this. I'm going to take a light pass, lots of overlapping passes. I'm going to take another pass because I want to go a little bit deeper down than what I am at the minute, because I want to get through the resin that's over the center of this timber. So I want to get down another, just a little over a mil, I think, shouldn't really do me. So finish the slab, another pass, and when I've that done, I get back to you, because there's no point in you guys watching me over and back in this. But you can see just how nice the router does on this resin. It's really, really nice. Okay, there we go. We have the top routed and flattened. Now it's exactly what we want, and it's already starting to look fantastic. So it's really starting to come out now and look great. So we have to hit this with some sandpaper. Now, a couple of things, piece of advice I give you, light passes. I did this in 2 passes, so I took about 1 millimeter for each pass, so I took roughly about 2 millimeters off. So all the resin, excess resin and stuff has now gone off it, all that caulk has gone off it and stuff, and you can start to see how nice these joints are and how nice the resin is going to look. It's going to look pretty special, I think, when this is done, hopefully, if we can get a nice finish on it. Piece of advice then, just the PPE. Definitely wear a dust mask, a pair of goggles, watch your hands, the chippings that come off the resin, they're kind of glass-like, so you can get a nice cut off them, a nice splinter. Make sure you wear goggles, like I said, you don't want those things getting in your eyes. Some of them can be quite sharp, so just be careful of that. And yeah, just light passes. So now what I need to do is hit this with some 80 grit sandpaper, start flattening it all down, and I have some holes and stuff to fill where there was air bubbles and we have some cracks, so I'm going to use the glass cast 3 surfacing resin to put that down and fill all these holes after I sand it down to 80 grit, and then we'll have to leave that set up for a couple of days, and then we shall do the final sanding and finishing on this. So yeah, looking quite good now. I'm quite happy with how this is turning out, so let's get on the sanding process. Right guys, there we go. One of my least favourite jobs is sanding. I hate wearing all that PPE and stuff, but you got to do it. So I brought out the bigger Orbital Sander to try and take all the tool marks out of this. Definitely if I'm going to make more of these tables, I'm going to invest in better sanding equipment. A belt sander would have made this an easy job. The Orbital Sander took an hour or more, but a belt sander would do this in minutes. So yeah, we've all the tool marks out now. You've seen me just blow it off with some compressed air there. I was just knocking all the air out of all the little holes that I have to fill. So I got some air bubbles forming, and once you sand down through that, then you can see the little air bubbles, and I have some cracks to fill. So I'm going to mix up now some of the clear cast number 3, which is a surfacing resin, and we're going to just put that down into all the little cracks and any little hole that we have to fill. We'll let that set up then for a day or two, and we should be able to go through our grits and finish off sanding this table. So let's do that. Okay, so we're going to mix up some of this clear cast number 3. Now this is the surfacing resin, so it's up to 3 millimeters, I believe. This is what you pour this to, but it dries extremely flat and extremely clear, so you could actually use this to surface your tables with. You could pour a layer of this back into your mould, let it flow over your top of your table. It would self-level and you would get a super clear finish. So that's what this is actually used for making the penny floors, tabletops and all that good stuff. So it's a surfacing resin. So I'm just going to mix up a small bit of this, and then I'm going to pull some into a syringe and just use this then to squirt into all the holes. So let's get on it. And this is a 2-to-1 mix by weight. So let's let our scale set up. There we go. We only want a really small bit of this now, so make sure there's no dust in that actually. There we go. Okay, just get mixing. Okay guys, there we go. All the little holes now are plugged, and I took extra care to make sure we got every a little one, so that when we finish this, we'll have a nice, perfect surface. We want this to be as nice as possible. So again, this little syringe is very handy just to use some of that surface resin just to fill all those holes. Now I'll have to leave this for a couple of days to let that set up, go hard before I can sand it. So it'll be a few days for me, but it'll be a couple of seconds for you guys. Now, make sure you follow me on Instagram, guys. I'm on there and I'm sharing all the behind the scenes stuff that's happening with this in the stories on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, my account, it'll be in the description below. Just click on it, give me a follow there, and you'll be able to see all the little behind the scenes with this video as well. So I'm going to get out of here now. I'm going to let this set up. Again, it'll be a few days for me, but a few seconds for you. So I'll see you shortly. What's happening, guys? You might be asking yourself, what am I doing on the floor? Well, when I left you guys, I had just put the surface resin into the few air bubbles on the top, and we were just preparing the top. And I came back, I noticed that the slab, most of the twist I had taken out of the slab because I had a little clamp for a couple of days. So we took most of the twist out of it. It was nice and flat. So I said the only thing to do now is to flatten the base. So I was on my assembly table. I just checked the depth of my sidewalls from my router sled to make sure that everything was aligned, and I had a 5mm discrepancy between both sides. It turns out the top on my assembly table is slightly off. So that may be what gave me my initial 5mm discrepancy. So I've rebuilt the router sled on the floor. Everything is to the millimeter down here. So I'm flattening the base now. So we have to flatten the base, sand the base. I'm not going to take this up to a same level of polish as the top. It doesn't need to be. So maybe a 320 grit, and we'll just get an oil into it and we'll call that good enough. But the base now is perfectly flat. So now I can work on the top, and I'm guaranteed now that my slab is nice and flat now. So that's what I'm doing there on the floor. It is a reference surface. I know my floor is perfectly flat. I've checked everything measurements wise, and yeah, I have a nice flat slab now for my coffee tabletop. So it's always worth checking and rechecking, especially if you go away from your jigs for a couple of days, to make sure that nothing's moved or nothing has changed, because 5mm is quite a discrepancy when you're taking shavings off the top. It could be 5mm the difference between this corner and this corner, and that's why I'm down on the floor, and it is bloody hot today. So let's get sanding. Right, we are back up off the floor and getting ready to sand. So you can see all the little pieces that I filled in there, that's all after curing, and it's good and hard. So I'm just going to sand this back flat again using 80 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand the other side to 80 grit. Then I'm going to take the track saw, square this to its final dimensions, and then we'll get on with the final sanding. So let's do this. It's just a case of sand away. Again, I'm using my larger Orbital Sander with some 80 grit sandpaper. If I was to do much more of these tables, like I said already, I would definitely invest in better sanders and polishers. I'm using kind of really cheap ones now, but they do the job, and we'll get there. Again, it's only a small table, but I can see why guys pay big money for Festool and stuff like that for the proper sanders, because when you're doing tables like this, you really, really need them. But yeah, we'll rock on with this one. Let's do it. Okay guys, now that it's all sanded up and all the tool marks are out of it, my next job is to square up these edges. So I want to establish a perfectly straight line on this side, and I can square everything else off that then. So let's just do this nice and quick and simple with the track saw. Here we go. All our edges are nice, flat, square and true, so you can kind of see the shape it's going to be now and the pattern that we have on our top, and it looks absolutely fantastic, I think. So it's going to be really, really nice from here. So it's good and flat, good and square. Everything is working out quite nicely. So now we need to start moving up through the grits. So I'm just going to be using my Ryobi. It's a small 125mm Orbital Sander. Again, it's not the most expensive one, but it's not a bad little one. And I'm going to be using these Mirkra Abranet dust-free sanding sheets. And they're actually dust-free. It's those kind of sanding nets, these type ones, so they don't clog. So it's important that you don't pull grit around this finish when you're going up through the really high grits, because that's what gives you the pigtails. And these net type sanding discs tend not to hang on to the grit. They don't get clogged up, so you're not scratching it over the surface the whole time. So it's a little bit awkward, this one to sand, like I said before, because of the mix of the resin and the timber. So we need to polish up the centre of this so we can see back down through this. And we need to get the resin out here polished, but we can't take the timber up to a super fine grit because it won't take oil. So I reckon I'm going to get up to about 320 grit. That's as far as I'm going to take the timber, and I'm going to try to move around the areas of the resin and get that up and get that polished. And hopefully now we can get an oil into this. I think I'm just going to use a Danish oil. Danish oil will work with this resin, so they say, and it's nice and easy to apply. So the fact that this is kind of my first resin table, I'm going to stick with a nice simple finish to use. And we get some Danish oil into it, and then I have a nice wax that I'm going to finish it off with. So I'll show you all that. So it's just a case of getting sanding now. So we're on to 120 grit. Now I'm going to try these Abernets, so let's get on it. Okay guys, we are sanded up to 320 grit on the front and the back and around the sides. I'm not going to go any higher than that on the wood. The wood feels silky smooth to touch now, so I'm worried any higher grits on this and it's not going to take an oil. 320 on oak I think is more than enough. Maybe even 240 would be a good place to stop on this and put some oil into it. But now I have to keep sanding the resin, so I'm going to start hand sanding with some wet dry sandpaper. So I'm going to work my way up through all the grits from 400 all the way up to 1200. Then I'm going to polish it. So I've got some of this boat polish that came from the guys from MID Glass Fiber Solutions. It's to work with this resin. So I'm going to use that. I have a polishing pad, a medium polishing pad that I'm just going to stick onto my random orbital sander because I don't have a polisher. I'm going to set this to its slowest speed and we're going to use it just like that and take it nice and easy so that we don't burn or overheat anything, because I think polishers run at a really slow speed compared to your sanders. Okay, so that's it. So it's hand sanding from here. You could stop at 320 on this resin where the pattern is. It's just a case of put oil on this now and this will come up lovely. But for the center section I have to get this polished and see-through again, so we have to spend a bit of time on this. So let's crack on. It's just elbow grease from here on out. Okay, so just a small bit of soapy water here just to use with the wet dry sandpaper. And one thing I have to remember is that water will raise the grain in the timber, so I just have to be careful along the edges to go back over that just to make sure there's no raised grain before we get our final finish in. But this is now just going to be lots of sanding by hand. So yeah, I should crack on with this and make my way through the grain. Or the grit, I should say. There you go guys, that's just after the 400 grit. You can see you already have a lovely finish on this. So to get a wax or a polish into this now is nearly enough. So wherever you have the kind of non-see-through resin or the kind of patterned resin, you can stop at 400 grit, that's perfectly fine. But the see-through stuff, you really want to polish that up. So I'll crack on now, make my way through all the grits and I'll show you when we're done. Okay guys, we are all the way up to 1200 grit on the resin. Now, I've polished a little bit here with the polishing pad and we're getting a nice see-through clear piece of resin to see down to the table. Now, it's proven quite tricky because obviously I'm trying to polish these parts only. I'm not trying to go into the wood. I'm trying to keep the compound off the wood, which is proving quite hard. The small little drill polishing pad might actually be the way to go doing this. I haven't got one though, so I'm going to just have to be careful. But yeah, you're trying to sand just little areas and not other areas. So it's quite a tricky sanding process, but we're getting through it. So I'll crack on now. I'm just going to keep hitting this with the pad and the polishing compound. And it's doing a nice job, like I say, getting this nice and clear. I'll give you a close-up of it now, but it is quite tricky and you definitely have to plan it out how you're going to finish a table like this. Yeah, I'll have a close-up there. It's going to be hard for you guys to see it with the shine. I'll try and get it captured as best I can, but you can see this is all smoky here. So we're going to hit this some more with some of the polishing paste and the pad on the Orbital Sander. So again, this is not the ideal thing to be using. An Orbital Sander moves too fast for a polisher. Is a lot slower rotating machine, but we just take it easy and make sure we don't spend too long in one area and that we're not burning anything. That's all we got to watch for. Okay guys, there we go. We are all polished up. I have it as clear as I think I can get it. Now I probably could get some higher grits of polish and really work on this and get it crystal clear, but I'm going to get a coat of oil into it tonight. I want a kind of a nice satin finish on this. I don't want anything too shiny. Now you can use the glass cast tree, put this back in the mould and just pour that all over it, and that will self-level. It goes really, really flat and you will get a super shiny resin finish, and it'll really help see down into the table. But I'm going to go for a kind of a satin finish. I'm going to use some Danish oil because you can use it with this resin and keep it nice and simple. Now, it is quite difficult to sand and polish resin next to wood. So it's the joint between your wood and the resin is the issue, because you're trying to get this to say 320 grit, you're trying to get this to 1200 grit, and then you're trying to use a compound to polish it without disturbing any of the wood. And what can happen is the fibers or the dust off the resin goes in to the pores of the wood, and you can kind of see it along the joint. So it is quite difficult, especially with this centerpiece, because I'm trying to polish it to such a high level that you can see through it, and trying to keep the wood at a level that you can get some oil into it is quite difficult. So maybe the glass cast tree would be the best option for this, but again, it's all an experiment on my behalf, so I'm going to get some Danish oil onto it. Now, thing about oiling your table is make sure you oil it front and back. If you oil the top and not the bottom can absorb more moisture than the top, and you can come back and your table can be cupped. So if you're going to oil a table, oil it both sides in the one go to ensure that both sides will either lose moisture or absorb moisture equally, because believe me, if you oil one side it can go like a banana. Right, so I'm going to oil the back of this first, flip it over, get some Danish oil onto the back of it. The back of it, I've only finished at 320 grit. I didn't even bother to take the tool marks out of it because it's not going to be seen. It's the underneath of the table. I'm not going to spend several hours getting this to a polish as well, or pouring resin into all the little holes to get them filled. There's no need. There's going to be a frame underneath this, and this is going to be the underside of the table. So let's get some oil on this. Just going to get this into it now. You can see, I'll give you a close up now in a second, but you can see how that affects the resin. It makes it look beautiful already. So that's great. I just want to get this into it tonight, the first coat of Danish oil. Hopefully the wood will absorb it and I haven't gone into too high a grit. Okay guys, there we go. First coat of oil is on both sides and it looks stunning. I'm really pleased with how this is turning out. So we'll get another coat on in the morning and we'll see. I'll try and capture it as best I can. It's hard with the lights in the shop and stuff reflecting off the surface to try and get you guys to capture what it really looks like. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. So we'll get another coat of oil on it in the morning. We'll have a quick look and I think that's going to be a good point to end this video. So we've taken it from the mold, we've flattened it again, we've sanded it and we've got the oil on. So the next thing will be to build a frame, and then when we put it on its frame, we give it its final wax. So one more coat tomorrow and then we'll stop the video. Okay guys, it is the following morning and our first coat of oil is almost dry. So I'm just going to get a second coat into it now. I've already done the bottom. So I'm just going to concentrate on the wooden parts now. I'm not going to put any more Danish oil on the resin. I'm going to polish the resin later on when we have the table fully assembled. We'll do our final polish. I'm just going to use some of this nice liquid wax. It's a furniture wax and you get a really nice finish with it. I'm going to use a buffer and we'll buff the whole top. So for the rest of this video, it's just going to be one more coat of Danish oil. I'll give you guys a look at what it's going to be like. And yeah, we'll kind of try and sum it up then. Let's do it. Okay, let's get just a small bit more oil on this now. We're going to use lighter and lighter coats from here on out and just build it up so we get a nice sheen. You can build Danish oil up to a nice polish because it is just lacquer, tinners and either tung oil or linseed oil. So you can keep building it up if you want a really nice shiny finish on it. Just get lots of coats on. But we're just going to get some light coats into the timber now. And we'll use the polish to buff everything up afterwards. Probably hard to see now with the shine on the camera, but it's very, very difficult to capture this. But yeah, there we go. Let that get tacky now and just give it a quick wipe off and we're almost done. Right, there we go. That is our tabletop almost complete now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you've got something from this build and hopefully this is instilling you with some confidence to go try this yourself. You don't really need that many tools. I suppose the fanciest tool I used to cut this up was the track saw. A circular saw will do the job. We just used ordinary sanders, just cheap sanders I used to get this finish and it's a pretty nice finish. I even use one of the sanders as a polisher. Not the done thing, but needs must, and we use the tools that we have to hand. But you can see what a stunning table you can get. It's really not that complicated or that difficult. Just a little bit of patience and a little bit of forethought and you should be fine. So again guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have, hit the thumbs up. If you're new here, hit subscribe. On the next video we're going to get on to building the frame, so let me know in the comments what frame you would like to see this to go on. I want to make an oak frame for it. I haven't decided on the style of legs yet, but yeah, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. So hopefully I've captured it. Hopefully you can get a sense of how good this actually looks. It's hard to get it on camera. I did want to take it outside today into the daylight and show you, but it's raining as usual in Ireland, so we can't do that, but we'll get some lovely shots when we have this project completely finished. So that's it for now guys. I think we've kind of covered everything there. If you feel I've left something out or if I haven't said something or there's something you want to ask me or there's something you're not sure about, make sure and comment below. I'll ask and I will get back to you. So there you go guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. It's time for me to get out of here now once again. So I shall see you in the next episode of this where we start to build a wooden frame. I'll see you then.